Rain did not fall over the Montana Valley that night. It struck with force, sharp and unrelenting, drumming against the earth like a warning no one could ignore. The narrow road had dissolved into mud, thick and clinging, dragging at hooves and swallowing footprints before they could settle. Elias Thorne rode through it with quiet persistence. His coat was soaked through, the collar pulled high against the wind, but it did little to keep out the cold. Water ran from the brim of his hat in steady streams, tracing the hard lines of a face shaped by years of labor and solitude. He had taken the wrong turn miles back. He knew it now, but turning around in that storm would have been worse than pressing forward. So he rode on. The crumpled paper in his pocket, once a delivery slip, had lost its ink to the rain. Still, he remembered the name well enough. Morrison Ranch. But the gate before him told a different story. Tall wrought iron stood against the storm, unshaken, its black surface gleaming under a flash of lightning. 2 polished letters caught the light with sharp clarity. Silver Creek Ranch. Elias slowed his horse, studying it in silence. In this part of Montana, fences leaned, gates sagged, and wood wore down under seasons of neglect. But this was something else entirely. Strong, intentional, proud, not built for men like him. Thunder cracked overhead, and his horse reared slightly, snorting against the wind. Elias steadied it with a firm hand, his voice low and calm despite the storm. "Easy now, we just need a place to wait it out." The gate stood slightly ajar. That settled it. He dismounted, boots sinking deep into the mud as he pushed it open. The hinges creaked, protesting his presence, but gave way all the same. He led the horse through, stepping onto a gravel path that curved toward a house, barely visible through the curtain of rain. Each step forward felt heavier than the last, not from exhaustion, but from the growing sense that he was crossing into a place that did not welcome him. The house revealed itself slowly. First the outline, then the wide porch, then the tall white columns rising into the storm-dark sky. Even through the rain, it carried a quiet authority, wealth not flaunted, but undeniable, the kind that built distance between people without saying a word. Elias tied his horse near the steps and climbed up, boots leaving thick, dark marks behind him. For a moment, he hesitated at the door. Then he knocked. The sound echoed deeper than expected. Once, twice. At last, the door opened just enough to reveal a narrow face framed by tightly pulled gray hair. The woman's eyes dropped immediately to his boots, taking in the mud, the wear, the story they told. "You've knocked at the wrong door," she said, voice sharp and controlled. Elias removed his hat slowly. "Beg pardon, ma'am. I was headed for Morrison Ranch. Storm caught me off guard." "There is no Morrison Ranch," she replied without hesitation. "Not anymore." The door began to close. "Mrs. Henley." The voice came from deeper inside the house, low, firm, and impossible to ignore. The housekeeper stiffened slightly before opening the door wider. "She's mistaken, miss," Mrs. Henley said quickly. "Just a drifter." "Let him speak." Silence fell. Then she stepped forward. Marisol Vega. Elias felt it before he understood it, the shift in the room, the quiet command that didn't need raising its voice. She was not tall, yet she filled the doorway with presence alone. Her figure was full, strong, grounded in a way that spoke of labor as much as legacy. Her dark dress bore faint signs of work, dust at the hem, a crease at the waist, details no polished lady would allow. But she was no polished lady. She was something steadier. Her green eyes met his and held. "You came through this storm looking for Morrison?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am." Her gaze moved over him, not dismissive, not indulgent, measuring, seeing. "No one rides this far in weather like this without reason," she said after a pause. Mrs. Henley shifted. "Miss Vega, the floors can be cleaned." The words were quiet, but final. Marisol stepped aside. "Come in, dry yourself before you freeze out there." Elias hesitated only a second, not because he doubted her, but because he knew what he was bringing with him. Mud, cold, trouble. Still, he stepped inside. Warmth struck him immediately. Firelight, polished wood, the faint scent of herbs and something brewing in the distance. The space stretched wide and refined, every surface speaking of care, cost, and control. And every step he took left its mark behind him. He noticed. Of course he noticed.
But when he glanced back, expecting disapproval, he found none. Only Marisol watching him with that same steady gaze. She said, "Follow me." He did, through halls too grand for comfort, past walls lined with paintings that seemed to watch him as closely as she did. Yet the deeper they went, the more the house changed. The sharp edges softened, the warmth grew. They entered a kitchen alive with firelight, real, lived in. "Sit," she said, pulling out a chair. Elias obeyed. She poured coffee without ceremony and set it before him. Steam rose between them. For a moment, neither spoke. Outside, the storm continued its assault. Inside, something quieter began to take shape. Not trust, not yet, but something close enough to notice.
Morning came slowly to Silver Creek Ranch, as if the land itself needed time to recover from the night's violence. The storm had passed, but it left behind a heavy stillness. Mist hovered low over the fields, clinging to the grass, softening the edges of fences and hills alike. Elias Thorne was already awake. He stood near the eastern corral, sleeves rolled, hands moving with quiet efficiency as he inspected the fencing. The damage was clear. Posts loosened, wires sagging, sections strained by wind and time. It was the kind of work he understood without needing instruction, the kind of work that didn't ask questions. He tightened a line, tested its hold, then moved on. Behind him, footsteps approached, measured, steady. He didn't turn immediately. Marisol Vega stopped a few paces away, watching him work. The morning light revealed more than the lantern ever could. His movements, controlled and practiced, the way he conserved energy, never wasting effort, the quiet discipline of a man used to surviving alone. "You started early." Elias secured the wire before answering. "Didn't feel right sitting idle." "That wasn't what I meant." He straightened, wiping his trousers on his trousers before finally turning to face her. "What did you mean?" Marisol held his gaze. Her posture was composed, but there was something sharper beneath it this morning. Calculation, perhaps, or curiosity sharpened into intent. "You work like a man who doesn't expect to stay." The words landed clean. Elias tilted his head slightly. "Habit?" "Or distance," she countered. A pause stretched between them. He didn't deny it, didn't confirm it either. Instead, he glanced past her toward the open land, the wide stretch of Silver Creek waking under pale sunlight. "This place runs big, too big for half-fixed fences." "That's why I'm here," she replied. That drew his attention back. Marisol stepped closer, boots pressing into damp earth. Up close, there was nothing fragile about her. Her frame was full, yes, but grounded, steady, built for endurance, not display. Her hands bore the same truth as his, calluses earned, not hidden. "I need a foreman," she said. Elias blinked once, caught off guard by the directness. "You've seen the land," she continued. "You've seen the damage. This ranch doesn't forgive mistakes, and it doesn't wait for hesitation." He studied her carefully now. "You'd offer that to a stranger?" "I don't deal in strangers," Marisol said evenly. "I deal with what I observe." Her eyes flicked briefly to the fence he had just repaired. Effort, skill, consistency. Then back to him. "You showed all three before breakfast." Elias let out a faint breath, somewhere between a laugh and disbelief. "That's not enough to trust a man with a place like this?" "No," she agreed, "but it's enough to begin." Silence settled again, though this time it carried weight. Possibility. "What are the terms?" Elias asked at last. Marisol didn't hesitate. "3 conditions." He folded his arms loosely, listening. "First, you keep my herd through the spring. I won't lose more than 5%. Not to wolves, not to carelessness, not to poor judgment." Elias nodded once. Difficult, but not impossible. "Second, the water system is failing. 1 main well, 2 ditches. Fix them before the dry months where the land suffers." He exhaled slowly. That would take time, planning, labor. Still doable. "Third," she said, her tone shifting slightly, "you stand beside me in public matters, association meetings, gatherings, any place Silver Creek needs a presence." That made him pause.
"That's not my world," Elias said plainly. "I know," Marisol replied, "but it is mine. And if you stand for this ranch, you stand for it fully." He ran his hand along his jaw, thinking. "What's the pay?" She named it. Enough to settle a man, enough to tempt him to staying longer than he intended. Elias looked out over the land again, then back at her. "I'll do it," he said. Marisol gave a small, decisive nod. "Then we have an agreement." But Elias didn't move. "There's one more thing," he added. Her brow lifted slightly. "I thought I set the conditions." "You did," he said. "This one's mine." She waited. Elias stepped closer, not enough to crowd her, but enough to be fully present. "If I meet your terms," he said slowly, "if I do more than just keep this place running, if I give you something you don't already have." Marisol's eyes narrowed slightly. "Which is what?" "Peace," he answered. The word lingered between them. Unexpected. Honest. He held her gaze. "If I can give you 3 nights of real rest, no worry, no pacing, no ledger-keeping until dawn." He paused, then finished quietly. "Then you give me 1 night." The air shifted. Not tension, something deeper. Marisol didn't speak immediately. Her expression didn't change much, but something flickered beneath the surface. Surprise, yes, but also recognition. 1 night, she repeated. "A supper," Elias clarified. "A walk, a conversation without this," he gestured lightly to the ranch around them, "standing between us." Her lips curved faintly, not quite a smile. "You think my rest can be bargained for?" "I think it hasn't been offered before," he said. That struck something. She looked at him more closely now, not as a worker, not as a stranger, but as a man making a quiet kind of promise. "And if you fail?" she asked. "Then I leave," he said, simply. "No debt, no argument." The wind shifted through the field, brushing past them. Marisol considered him for a long moment. Then, "Fine," she said. 1 word, but deliberate. "You earn it," she added, "and you'll have your night." Elias gave a small nod. Fair enough. Neither reached out, neither smiled, but something had been set in motion. Not just a contract, a challenge, and neither of them intended to lose.
By late afternoon, the sky had begun to turn. What started as a distant line of dark clouds along the horizon slowly swallowed the light, pressing down over Silver Creek Ranch with quiet menace. The air grew heavy, still in a way that unsettled even the cattle. Birds vanished from the sky. The wind held its breath. Elias Thorne noticed first. He stood near the far pasture, one hand resting against a fence post, eyes fixed on the shifting clouds. Years in the mountains had taught him to read weather the way others read words, and this one promised trouble. He moved quickly. By the time the first wind struck, he had already reached the eastern fence line, and what he found there tightened his jaw. 2 posts were broken. The wire sagged low, loose and dangerous, barely holding tension. Another hard gust, another push from the herd, and the entire section would give way. And if it did, chaos. The first drop of rain hit the dust with a sharp hiss, then another. Within seconds, the sky opened. Elias pulled his coat tighter, already moving to secure what he could. He grabbed a spare stake, drove it into the ground with practiced force, muscles straining against wind and mud. He was halfway through tightening the wire when he heard it. Footsteps against the storm. He turned. Marisol Vega was already crossing the field, a lantern in one hand, her coat snapping behind her in the wind. "You shouldn't be out here," he shouted over the rising storm. She didn't slow. "This is my ranch," she called back. The answer was enough. Elias exhaled once, sharp and resigned, then turned back to the fence. "Fine," he muttered, "then stay close." By the time she reached him, the rain was relentless, heavy, slanting, driven by a wind that cut through cloth and skin alike. The lantern light flickered wildly, casting unstable shadows across the soaked ground. "What do you need?" she asked. "Hold that post steady," he said, already working.
Marisol stepped in without hesitation, bracing the broken section with both hands. Her grip was firm, shoulders squared, boots planted deep despite the mud threatening to pull her down. Elias noticed. Of course he did, but he said nothing. Instead, he drove another stake into place, each strike of the hammer swallowed by thunder rolling overhead. The storm was building fast now, the kind that erased sound and sense alike. When it came time to secure the wire, Marisol shifted her grip. "I can do that," she said. Elias stepped back slightly, letting her try. She grasped the slick metal, fingers tightening as she attempted to twist it into place. But the rain made it slippery, the tension unpredictable. The wire resisted, slipping free more than once. Frustration flickered across her face. "It's not holding," she said. "I see that." He stepped closer. "Here." Without asking, he reached for her hands. His touch was firm, but careful. He didn't take over. He guided. "Not like that," he said, voice lower now, steadier against the storm. "You're forcing it." Her breath caught slightly, not from the effort, but from the closeness. "Then how?" she asked. Elias moved in behind her, close enough that she could feel the heat of him even through the cold rain. His hands covered hers again, adjusting the angle gently. "It's not about strength," he murmured near her ear. "You guide it, let it settle where it wants." For a moment, the storm seemed to fall away, not in sound, but in meaning. All that remained was the rhythm of breath, the warmth of proximity, the quiet, unexpected steadiness of shared motion. "It's like this," he said. Together, they twisted the wire. This time, it held, locked into place with a final, clean turn. Neither of them moved. Not immediately. The lantern swung slightly in the wind, casting their shadows against the wooden post, blurred together, indistinct, a single shape. Marisol's hands remained beneath his. Her pulse was unsteady now, not from the storm, but from him. Slowly, she turned. The movement brought them face to face, closer than before, close enough that she could see the raindrops caught in his lashes, the tension in his jaw, the hesitation he didn't quite hide. Lightning split the sky. For a brief instant, everything was illuminated, her face, flushed despite the cold, his expression, stripped of its usual restraint. And in that moment, something shifted, not gradually, completely. Elias didn't step back, didn't look away. His voice, when it came, was quieter than the storm had any right to allow. "You make it impossible for me to look away." The words landed between them, raw and unguarded. Marisol's breath caught. She could have turned, could have stepped away, but she didn't. Instead, she held his gaze, steady, open. That was answer enough. Elias closed the distance. The kiss was brief at first, careful, almost uncertain, as though he expected her to stop him. She didn't. And when she responded, when her hand rose to his shoulder, fingers tightening slightly, it changed. The hesitation faded, not replaced by urgency, but by certainty. Rain pressed around them, relentless, heavy, drenching, cold, and yet the moment between them held warmth all its own. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing unevenly, the storm rushed back in, loud, insistent, impossible to ignore. But something was already set, something neither of them could undo. Marisol stepped back just a little, her hand still resting against his arm. Elias looked at her, not as a stranger now, not even as her employer, but as something more. "Perhaps," he said quietly, voice roughened by the moment, "perhaps this isn't just work anymore." Marisol's lips parted, then curved faintly, not quite a smile, but close. "Perhaps," she replied. They didn't speak again after that. Instead, they returned to the fence, side by side, finishing what they had started. But now, every brush of their hands, every shared glance, carried a new weight. The storm passed eventually, but what it left behind would not.
Night settled over Silver Creek Ranch with a quiet that felt earned. The storm from the day before had washed the dust from the land, leaving the air cool and clean. The sky stretched wide above the valley, dark and deep, scattered faintly with stars that seemed distant yet steady. From the house, a single oil lamp cast a warm glow across the porch, soft against the surrounding dark. Marisol Vega sat there alone. A cup rested untouched in her hands, long gone cold. Her fingers traced the rim absently, her thoughts far from the present moment. The ledger lay closed beside her, abandoned for once, its numbers unable to hold her attention the way they usually did. Sleep had been different lately. Not easy, but no longer impossible, and that unsettled her more than she cared to admit. Footsteps approached from inside. She did not turn. Elias Thorne stepped out onto the porch, closing the door quietly behind him. He paused for a moment, letting his eyes adjust to the dim light, then moved toward her with the same steady presence he carried in everything he did. He stopped beside the railing, not too close, not distant either. "Couldn't rest?" he asked. His voice was low, careful not to disturb the stillness. Marisol gave a faint breath that might have been a laugh, though it held no humor. "Not tonight." Elias nodded once, as if that answer made sense. He rested his hands against the wooden rail, looking out over the dark fields. For a time, neither of them spoke. The silence between them was not empty. It carried memory now. The storm, the fence, the moment that had shifted something neither had named aloud. Marisol broke it first. "You remember what you said?" she asked, quietly. Elias did not ask what she meant. "I do." She turned slightly, studying him in the lamplight. His shirt was open at the collar, sleeves rolled, traces of the day's work still visible in the lines of his hands. There was nothing polished about him, nothing practiced, and yet there was something steady. "You said if you gave me peace," she continued, her voice slower now, measured, "I would give you one night." Elias glanced at her then. "I remember that part, too." Silence followed again, but this time it carried something heavier, a decision waiting to be made. Marisol set the cup down beside her, her hands now free but no less restless. She rose slowly from the chair, stepping away from the lamplight just enough that shadows softened the sharpness of her expression. "What is it you want from me, Elias?" she asked. The question was not defensive, it was honest. Elias turned fully toward her. For once, he did not take time to think. "Nothing you don't choose to give." The answer came without strain, without performance. It landed differently because of that. Marisol searched his face for something else, expectation perhaps, or entitlement, but there was none, only patience, only a quiet certainty that did not press, did not demand. That unsettled her more than anything else could have. "You've worked hard," she said after a moment. "You've done more than I asked. I didn't do it for the wager. I know." That was the problem. She stepped closer, the distance between them narrowing slowly, deliberately. The scent of rain still lingered faintly in the air, mixing with the warmth of the house behind them. "And now?" she asked. Elias exhaled, his gaze steady on hers. "Now, I'm asking." The words were simple, but the tone carried weight. Not the boldness he had shown in the daylight, not the rough edge of a challenge, something quieter, more vulnerable. "Please," he said. The words softened the space between them. "Allow me one night." Marisol's breath caught, not visibly, not dramatically, but enough that she felt it. This was not the same man who had made a wager in the morning light. This was someone else entirely, someone who understood what he was asking and what it might cost. "What would that night be?" she asked. Elias took a step closer, careful, giving her time to move away if she wished. "A night without roles," he said. "No ranch, no contracts, no distance." He paused, then added quietly, "Just you and me, as we are." The honesty in it stripped the moment of anything else it could have been mistaken for. There was no pressure, no expectation, beyond presence. Marisol looked at him for a long time, years of guarded choices, of measured decisions, of never allowing herself to step beyond what was necessary. They all stood between them. And yet, so did something else now. Trust, not complete, but growing. "You ask like a man who's ready to accept no," she said. Elias gave a faint nod. "I've had worse answers." That almost made her smile. Almost. She turned slightly, glancing out over the dark land that had defined her life for so long. Everything she had built, everything she protected, it had always required distance, control. But tonight, standing there with him, that control felt less certain, less necessary. When she looked back at him, her expression had changed, softer, still strong, but open in a way it had not been before. "All right," she said. One word, but it carried decision, not hesitation, not doubt, choice.
Elias did not move immediately, did not reach for her. He simply held her gaze, acknowledging what she had given. "All right," he repeated quietly. The night did not shift dramatically after that. No sudden movement, no urgency, just a shared understanding settling between them. Marisol stepped past him toward the door, then paused, not turning fully. "Don't make me regret it." There was no threat in her voice, only truth. Elias watched her for a moment before answering, "I won't." She nodded once and stepped inside. Elias followed after a brief pause, closing the door behind him. The lamp flickered. The house grew still again, but something had changed within its walls. Not loudly, not visibly, but in a way that would not be undone.
The house was quieter than it had ever been. Not empty, never that, but still in a way that felt deliverant. The long halls of Silver Creek no longer echoed with distance. Instead, they carried a warmth that had slowly, almost quietly, taken root over time. It had not happened in a single night, but that night had changed everything. Months had passed since Elias Thorne stood on the porch and asked, "Please, allow me one night." What he had been given was not just time, it was trust, fragile and unfamiliar, offered by a woman who had built her life on control and distance, and he had not broken it. Morning light stretched across the fields now, golden and wide, touching every corner of the ranch that had once felt too large for one person to carry. Silver Creek had changed under their shared effort. Fences stood firm, water flowed where it once failed, and the land itself seemed to breathe easier. Elias moved through it with purpose, not as a visitor, not as a hired hand, but as someone who belonged. Near the stables, he paused, resting a hand along the wooden rail as he watched the cattle drift slowly across the pasture. His movements were no longer cautious or measured by distance. They were steady, grounded, certain. Behind him, footsteps approached. He didn't need to turn to know who it was. Marisol Vega stopped beside him, her presence as calm and assured as ever. Yet something about her had softened in recent months, not weakened, but opened. The rigid edges she once carried had eased, shaped now by something more than responsibility alone. "Fence is holding," she said, her voice quiet but satisfied. Elias nodded. "For now, I'll check the south line before dusk." She studied him briefly, then looked out over the land. "You always find something to fix." "Habit," he said lightly. Marisol tilted her head slightly. "Or purpose." That earned the faintest hint of a smile from him. For a moment, they stood in silence. It was no longer the silence of strangers. It was shared, comfortable, earned. "You remember the night you asked me?" she said after a while. Elias glanced at her, though he already knew the answer. "I remember every part of it." Her gaze remained on the horizon. "You said you only wanted one night." "I did. And yet," she paused, her voice carrying something softer now, "you stayed." Elias shifted his weight slightly, thoughtful. "I didn't plan to." "No?" "No," he admitted, "but I didn't plan on you either." That drew her eyes to him. There was no challenge in them now, only curiosity. "And what changed?" she asked. Elias took a breath, considering. "I didn't give me what I expected." Marisol's brow lifted faintly. "And what was that?" "A moment," he answered. "Something brief, something I could carry and leave behind." He looked at her fully now. "What you gave me was a reason to stay." The words settled between them, steady and unforced. Marisol held his gaze. In the beginning, she would have turned away from something like that, deflected it, questioned it. Now, she accepted it. "Funny," she said quietly. "I thought I was the one taking the risk." Elias shook his head slightly. "You were." She studied him a moment longer, then let out a small breath that carried more ease than she had allowed herself in years. "I built this place to stand on its own. Every wall, every acre. I made sure it didn't need anyone else. I can see that. But somewhere along the way," she paused, choosing her words carefully, "it stopped feeling like something I owned." Elias listened without interruption. "It felt like something I had to protect, constantly, alone." The admission lingered, honest, unpolished. "And now?" he asked. Marisol looked out over the ranch again, the land that had once defined her, and now no longer stood between her and anything else. "Now it feels like something we built," she said. The shift in that single word, "we," carried more weight than anything else she could have said. Elias nodded slowly. "Good," he replied. Marisol turned to him, a faint smile touching her lips, not guarded, not fleeting, but real. "You asked for one night," she said, "and I gave you more than that." She shook her head slightly. "No," she corrected, "I gave you a chance." Elias met her gaze, steady as ever, "and I took it." The wind moved through the grass around them, soft and constant, carrying the quiet sounds of the ranch in motion. Somewhere in the distance, a gate creaked, a horse shifted, life continuing as it always had. But for them, it was different now. Not because everything had changed, but because something had been chosen, again and again. Marisol stepped a little closer, her shoulder nearly brushing his. "You never did take just one night," she said. Elias allowed himself a small, rare smile. "Turns out," he replied, "one night wasn't enough." She didn't argue, didn't pull away. Instead, she let the silence settle again, this time filled not with uncertainty, but with something steady, something lasting. The sun climbed higher, casting light across Silver Creek Ranch, touching the fences, the fields, the house behind them. A place once defined by distance and solitude now carried something else entirely. Not just work, not just survival, but connection. And as they stood there, side by side, neither rushing forward nor holding back, it became clear that one night had never been the end of anything. It had been the beginning of something neither had planned, but both had chosen.